When I was a kid, I stumbled across this girl's diary. I found it in my parents' attic, covered in dust, and I opened its pages and started reading, and just was immediately drawn into her story. I mean, she wrote in her diary like people don't write in diaries anymore. I mean, she wrote everything. You can imagine her kind of embarrassing moments, highs and lows, things she hoped for, things the hurt she experienced, the times maybe she felt rejected, stories about her family, fights with her brothers. She just wrote all of these stories, and as a kid, I would read through her diary, and over time, I start to really identify with her, and I start to feel like I know her, and I never met her. I have no idea who she is or if she's even alive anymore. And she was really articulate, and then so open and honest, and it helped me to even to understand what was happening in my own life, and to express some of the longings in my own heart, and some of the hopes and the dreams that I had, and the fears that I had. So I just got really drawn into her story, and over time, you feel like I felt like I really got to know her. Then one day I opened the newspaper and I found out, hey, I recognized the name, and I was like, hey, that's the girl I've been reading about. And then I was able to track her down, and then with a kind of sense of adventure, like of discovery, like I'm gonna go meet her. And so I set out on this journey to go meet this girl who didn't have any idea who I was, didn't know the first thing about me, but I knew a whole lot about her, and I was just excited to meet her. And so I went to Israel, and I met the Jewish people, and really for the first time in my life. And I'd grown up in a small town in South Carolina, Beaufort, South Carolina. Hardly any Jewish people in town, and I didn't really know any growing up. And so this was my first experience getting to know the Jewish people in the flesh. When I was in Israel, I worked with an Israeli nonprofit called the One Family Fund, Mishpacha Achat. It's an organization that helps victims of terrorism. So I had the privilege of spending days with people who'd been injured in terrorist attacks, visiting them in the hospital, in their homes, and sharing Shabbatot with them and Chagim. As Chaver Shali Ba'aretz, ani ma'aseh mitgageh alechem. I really miss my family there. They welcome me as family, and they'll always be family to me. Not only does she have the same hopes and dreams, and she's have those same longings, but she's also still beset by enemies all around her. And she's still slandered by her neighbors and by the world in the way that she was back in the times of the kings and back in the times of the prophets. She's still in that, she still has those same challenges or those same struggles. And she's still, in the midst of all that, still crying out to God to redeem her and to come and to save her and to fulfill all his promises that he made, and to be her protection, to be her shomer, shomer Yisrael.
Eyes open, summer 2014. The sound of thunder woke me up from my sleep. Throngs of angry people.
In the summer of 2014, I was following in the news the war between Gaza and Israel, and reading more and more about how that was playing out on the streets of Europe. Reading about what was happening, the riots that were going on, and some of the nasty outbreak of anti-Semitism that came along with the war. And I have some friends, Shelley Niece with the Jerusalem Connection and her husband Brian, they're like family. And so we were following this situation closely, and one day Shelley said, Andrew, you should write something about that. There's an urgency to this, and there's a sense also in which people aren't paying attention, or people are explaining it away. And so rap was actually, as odd as it is, to write a rap about anti-Semitism, rap was the perfect way to address this. And started thinking more about it, even praying about it, and I was really shocked by what I saw. And that's I think is where the eyes opened idea comes from. In the first line was that as I read more and more about this, it was almost like my eyes were open to this is serious. And it was that when I read, it was like a New York Times article, there were protests in Germany where they were screaming, "Gas the Jews." And I thought, are people paying attention to this? That's serious. People would say that it's just the Muslim immigrant community in Europe they haven't really assimilated well, and they're frustrated, disenfranchised. They are lacking jobs, and this is, they really don't mean what they're saying. It's just they're just frustrated, and they see what's happening in Israel. They see what Israel's doing to the Palestinians, and so this is their way of venting that. This isn't really anti-Semitism. I mean, it's almost like, nothing to see here, move on. And reading that, you're reading statements like "Gas the Jews," or what was it? Another chant was "Jew, Jew, cowardly pig, come out and fight." In France, "A death to the Jews." I mean, and reading about a supermarket where they took kosher food off the shelves, or the pharmacy that was burned down, or the different synagogues that were attacked, and just seeing like protesters on the streets, or seeing footage of that, and you see in the video the footage of that. That's not a political protest. Protesters don't scream "Death to the Jews." There's a hate there, and so I'm reading this and I'm thinking, like, I had to open my eyes to this is serious, and this is a bit of a tipping point. But in the summer of 2014, it was like they threw off the mask about making this just about Israel. I mean, when you scream "Death to the Jews," I mean, or when you're attacking synagogues or attacking Jews physically, obviously this is not about Israel. This is anti-Semitism, pure and simple. And I know I don't look like your typical rapper, but you feel like I got to say something. And so the rap is basically our way to say, like, wake up. The tide is turned. There's a storm coming. I mean, the signs are everywhere, and this is only increasing. The attacks against Jews were have been especially bad in France. And when you think of Jewish history in France, obviously one of the first things that comes to mind is the Dreyfus Affair. Jews of France thought that they were in post-Enlightenment France, that they'd been thought they had equal freedoms, and we thought in a way kind of we're beyond the past. Like we've moved past the historic anti-Semitism, where it's a new day. And then here you have the trial of Alfred Dreyfus, a decorated Jewish soldier who's falsely accused of treason, and it was obvious the miscarriage of justice, and there was an outbreak of anti-Semitism that accompanied the trial. And so Theodore Herzl is a young journalist, and he's watching this, and he's seeing, like, wow, this is not going away. As I say in the song, there was no appeasing them in the time of Dreyfus or today. They'd imagined this grievance to lend credence to the belief that maybe the Jews were the reason for all the problems they had. Just in the way that I think that today they make Israel out to be a boogeyman, so that then they're justified in blaming the Jews for all the problems they're experiencing, for the frustrations they have, for not integrating into Europe, or for the problems in the Muslim world. It was that moment when Theodore Herzl saw what was coming. In my opinion, the summer of 2014 was that moment when we all should have taken note and seen where this was going, and seen what was coming. Because the hate that came out on the streets, that's not going away. And so this, the idea in the rap is to say, get your head out of the sand. This is for real. This is not going away. And it's not that there's going to be a Holocaust tomorrow. This isn't, the summer of 2014 wasn't Kristallnacht. But it's that day when you see what's coming, when you see that this isn't going away. So rather than dismiss it or ignore it, we need to act. And I think seeing the video clips, that's when you realize, yeah, this is as bad as it seems. I mean, this is as bad as it looks. Actually, even worse. And so I think there's a challenge in the song not to look away, and not to give way to that temptation to explain it away. Our song, it challenges you to look into the storm, and rather than put your head in the sand, act. Today, we Christians have an opportunity to stand with Israel, to see through the lies that the world tells about her. We know her. We've been reading her story since we were kids. We wouldn't be who we are without her. She's not perfect. She never claimed to be, but she is the apple of God's eye. And her story is still unfolding. Her diary is still being written. And today, you have an opportunity to be a part of her story.